Conversation with the Candidate continues.
Welcome back to Conversation with the Candidate and our candidate, former Congressman John Delaney. We're going to jump right into our town hall format here with our voters, and we're going to start with Grace Kennedy from Hudson.
Welcome.
Grace.
Welcome. Representative Delaney, do you think it's time for us to get out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria?
I do think we should get our troops home as soon as we practically can, but I think we need standards for each of those specific countries for what needs to be achieved before we bring our troops home. I mean, Afghanistan has been the longest war or engagement, if you will, that this country's ever had, right? We've been there for 18 years now. And the amount of investment we've made in that part of the world in terms of the young men and women who we've lost and the amount of taxpayer money that's been invested in those places, it is time to bring our troops home. But we can't do it before we meet certain goals or milestones in those countries, because then everything we have done and all the sacrifices we've made, we could potentially lose any progress. So let's look at Syria, for example, because the president recently called to bring our troops back from Syria, but then he quickly reversed some of that decision, which was actually the right thing to do. He didn't consult with his advisors when he did it. He had a conversation with the leader of Turkey and made a decision kind of on the fly. That's not the way you make decisions to bring our troops home. So Syria, for example, I think three things have to be achieved before we bring our troops home. The first, we need assurances that the Kurds, who fought with us side by side in some of the most difficult battles in Syria, right, against ISIS, we have to get assurances from Turkey that they will not attack the Kurds. The Kurds were our allies in that battle, and we have to make sure that if we pull our troops out, that these allies of ours are not suddenly attacked by Turkey. So that's one thing I would want to see. The second thing I'd want to see is the fact that ISIS is really, in fact, defeated. ISIS is a threat to the United States of America. We've made tremendous progress, right? And it's basically, at this point, not an organized group, and it's in disarray and isn't really a substantial threat, but we're not completely finished, as we know, because we've seen some things. The other thing that has to happen is Iran has a very, very significant footprint in that country right now, and we want to make sure Syria is not just a puppet of Iran. So there's an example about how I think about it. Very specific goals that I want to see achieved before we bring our troops completely out of those countries. And the same is true with Afghanistan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grace. We go to our next question from Gail Austin.
Hey, Gail.
No, I'm not Gail.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, the rundown was incorrect. So just introduce yourself and ask your question.
Dr. Dennis Shea.
Dennis.
Yes. As you're aware, there are over 50 million senior citizens in this country. And one of our problems, of course, is medical costs. What are your plans to reduce those?
To reduce medical costs. So
Yes.
it's an important issue. And it's Dennis, right?
Yes.
Did I hear that you're a doctor?
Yes.
Great. So,
Not a medical doctor.
not a medical doctor.
But a doctor.
So if you and I were sitting here thinking about the long-term fiscal health of the United States of America, the number one issue we'd have to deal with is healthcare. Right? Healthcare is 1/6 of the U.S. economy. If it was its own country, it'd be one of the largest countries in the world. And the rate of growth of healthcare expenditures has far exceeded the rate of growth of everything else in our economy, which is one of the reasons the American people haven't gotten a raise in so long, because any increase in productivity in our economy has been absorbed by healthcare. So the question you're getting at, Dennis, which is how do we control healthcare costs, is so incredibly important. It's one of the reasons that I believe we need a universal healthcare system. Right? And in many ways right now we have a form of a universal healthcare system. It's just a terrible system. And what I mean by that is every American can show up in an emergency room and actually get care by law. But emergency room visits are 10 to 15 times more expensive than going to a primary care physician. So it's an example of how broken our healthcare system is. So I've proposed that we have a universal healthcare system where everyone gets healthcare as a right. We leave Medicare alone. We create a new program for Americans that they get from when they're born to when they're 65. It's a basic government healthcare plan. But they can also opt out of it or get supplemental programs very similar to what happens with Medicare. I think the best healthcare system for this country would involve a basic government plan that everyone gets as a right, so that if you're a low-income American, you have health care. If you're between jobs, you have health care. If you want to go start a business, you have health care. If you're a child that ages off a parent's plan, you have health care. Everyone should have health care as a right, but they also should have options, right, to buy a commercial insurance plan if they want, or to get a supplemental plan from a commercial insurance company. I think that kind of model, with the right incentives around how care is delivered, and the Affordable Care Act actually put in place a bunch of good things that we're starting to see some of the benefits of it in terms of healthcare costs. I think that type of a model will lead to a healthcare system in the future where we have universal access, where we have high quality, and where we start controlling costs. And I'm so glad you asked this question, because when we think about healthcare, too many people just talk about access, right? How do we get the American people access? That's really important, and we should have universal access. But we have to do some things to control costs. Pharmaceutical prices is another thing. I mean, we don't allow the federal government to negotiate with Medicare right now. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Imagine Walmart not being able to negotiate prices as the largest buyer of goods. But that's the position we've put the federal government with respect to Medicare. It cannot negotiate these prices. So that's one thing I'm going to change. But the other thing I'm going to change is I'm going to make this kind of a global trade issue. Because one of the things that's happening right now is the United States of America, the citizens of the United States of America, are effectively funding the whole pharmaceutical industry. But literally, citizens in Germany and Spain, in many cases, they spend a third of what we do on pharmaceuticals. And the reason for that is they have one person who negotiates the price. So in Germany, one person negotiates the price, and they hammer down those prices. Wherever you buy pharmaceuticals in Germany, you pay that price. And in some ways, what those countries do is they negotiate the prices below cost. And then the pharmaceutical companies come to the United States of America, and they jack up the prices. Right? So you, the taxpayers of the United States of America, are funding the entire global pharmaceutical industry. To some extent, the rest of the world is free riding against us or off us. And listen, I'm all for selling pharmaceuticals to poor countries at low prices, but I'm not for citizens in wealthy countries paying a third of what we do for pharmaceuticals. So I'm going to make this a trade issue to ensure that the United States of America pays the same for pharmaceutical prices as the other wealthy countries in the world, the G20, if you will. So that's another issue related to healthcare costs.
Dr. Shea, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Benjamin Pelletier of Nashua.
Hi, Representative Delaney.
Hello, Benjamin.
What is your plan to stop the opioid epidemic in states like New Hampshire?
Well, it's such an important question. And it was funny, I was just talking to a police officer, a member of law enforcement, right before I came out on the stage. And we were talking about what he sees in his day-to-day job in terms of how this is affecting our community. We talk about how adoptions are so up because you find these situations where both members of the household, have gotten caught up in this crisis and they're in rehab or, worse. And it's really ravaging this country. I mean, we have about 200 people who die every day in the United States of America from addiction. And we all know opioids is a big part of that. First thing we got to do is we got to treat it like a public health crisis, because that's really what it is. It's not really a criminal justice issue. It's a public health issue. And we have to put the resources into the public health system, right, to deal with this issue. And it's actually really important that we do it, not just because of the number of people who are affected by it, but what it's doing to our communities. In other words, the cost of not dealing with this crisis is much greater than what it would cost us to deal with it. So I'm calling for a significant increase in the amount of funding for public health interactions and interventions in communities. There's a lot of things that are working in communities. There's a lot of nonprofits. There's a lot of community-based organizations that are working. And what the federal government needs to be doing is identifying the best practices, seeing what's working in communities, and putting more resources behind those methods, right? But the other thing we got to deal with is we got to deal with all the economic dislocation that's going on in this country. Because unless we deal with that issue, right, there'll be something else, right? It won't be opioids, but it'll be some other issue. Meaning the conditions that exist in our communities create the environment where you can kind of have the epidemic that we're seeing, right? So that's why one of the big agendas I have is to make sure there's investments in communities that are left behind, whether they be rural America or urban America, where people aren't investing, where there's no jobs, where there's a lot of despair. We need to get more people investing in these communities. So it starts with smart economic policies, right? It involves dealing with this as a public health issue and making sure we have the resources behind it. But it also involves accountability, right? I read in the paper this morning that one of the main manufacturers of opioids is going to file for bankruptcy, right? As they should, because they're being sued, as they should be, because these pharmaceutical companies knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. So, great question. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thanks, Benjamin. Our next question comes from Lynn Ward Healy of Bedford.
Hey, Lynn.
Welcome. Glad to have you in New Hampshire again.
Nice to be here.
How will a moderate such as yourself avoid being pulled to the progressive end of the party during this primary season?
Well, thank you for that question. And, you know, I tend to not get caught up in these labels that much because I consider myself a problem solver first and foremost. In other words, I want to get real things done that matter to the American people. So whether it's climate change or other issues that progressives really care about, for example, I have real solutions. So I'm just going to stay in my solutions-oriented lane. Because when I look back at American history, right, I see that all the great things we've ever done, all the enduring things that we've done that have really transformed our society and have lasted, they were all done when we came together as Americans. Not as Democrats or Republicans or independents, but as Americans and got these things done. So as we think about our future, as we think about the kind of future we want to build together and the things we need to do, whether it be healthcare, whether it be dealing with opioids, whatever the case may be, we have to approach these things by finding common ground. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything done, right? Otherwise, you'll just keep talking about these things. So I'm kind of staying in the solutions-oriented lane, right? I got a vision as to how to improve healthcare. I've got a vision as to how we combat climate change, right? I have a vision as how we invest in communities that are left behind. I have plans for dealing with technology and how it's fundamentally changing everything in our society. I have real plans. I can show the American people how I'm actually going to get it done. I was the third most bipartisan member of Congress. And what we need is solutions. We need to stop talking about this stuff, and we need to start getting it done. So I'm going to stay focused on that. And I think as people look at what I want to do, they'll see a progressive vision, but they'll see someone who can actually get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next up is Bronson Stevens from New London.
Hello, Congressman.
Hey, Bronson.
Congressman, I'm a college student, so my question for you is what policies would you implement to combat the rising cost of tuition and in general to make college more affordable?
Great. Where do you go to school?
Colby Sawyer.
Oh, super. Good school. What grade are you in? Or what
I'm
level?
a junior.
You're a junior. Super. So this is what I would do. Let's start with public education broadly. Right now we have K through 12 as the basic public education system in this country. I think that should be pre-K through 14. And what I mean by that is every kid should start as pre-K as a right of public education. It's the best investment we make. It fundamentally changes the trajectory of their education. But then after high school, I think every kid in America deserves at least 2 years of either community college or career and technical training as part of basic public education. So that's the first thing I would do. That would effectively make 2 years of college free for people who want to go the community college to 4-year college route, right? And I think that would lower the burden of college expense significantly for a lot of young people. The other thing I want to do is I want to lower the rate on student loans. Right now, the federal government lends to you as a student, if you get student loans, at a rate that's marked up above the cost that where the federal government borrows. We don't do that for banks, for example. We lend to banks at the same rate the taxpayer borrows money at. For you as a student, I'd like to lend to you at the same rate we lend to banks. So a combination of making 2 years of community college free, lowering the rates on student debt, will create a pathway for kids, right, to have a much kind of more affordable college experience. So that's what I'm committed to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bronson. And now we have the much anticipated question from Gail Austin.
I really am
I'm
Gail
sorry,
Austin.
Gail. Sorry about that.
Good morning.
Sorry, Dennis. I didn't mean to get you guys mixed up there. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to know from every candidate, but you this morning, how much money you take from the from the NRA, and what is your plan to reduce gun violence in this country?
It's a great question. So the answer is I take no money from the NRA, and I never have. Right? So, and listen, they've never offered to give me money. Not that I would have taken it because of my policies. So where I stand on this issue is as follows. I think we should have universal background checks similar to the legislation that just passed in the House of Representatives. 97% of the American people support that. Literally 97% of the American people support universal background checks. The only reason we don't have them is because we have a broken democracy where there's way too much money from folks like the NRA buying the votes of elected officials to block it. So that's the first thing I want to do. The second thing I want to do is put a limitation on certain very high-powered kind of military-style assault weapons, which we don't need on our streets. And the third thing I want to do is push other kind of common sense measures like what we have in my state of Maryland, which are these red flag laws, which allow families, right, and just families, to go to the courts if someone in their family has a diagnosed mental health issue and they have a firearm and they've threatened either themselves or someone else. The family can go to the court and actually have the court intervene right around that situation and take the firearm away. And in my home state of Maryland, it's been incredibly successful. So I support common sense gun safety measures that make our schools safe. Do you know how many moms and dads are worrying about sending their kids to school?
Yes, I
Again,
do.
I had this amazing conversation with this terrific officer this morning, and he was telling me he just saw an ad for bulletproof backpacks. Think about that. They're selling bulletproof backpacks. Why are they doing that? Because people are so anxious and they're so scared. And that's just terrible, right? That's just terrible. So we need universal background checks, right? We ought to put limitations on certain types of weapons, and we ought to do things like red flag laws. That'll start making our schools safer. And then we also have to deal with the mental health crisis in this country. 40 million people are suffering from a mental illness in the United States of America. So those are some of the things I'm going to do as president so that people aren't advertising for bulletproof backpacks in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. And a quick follow-up on this, Congressman. How do you identify these at-risk people, do you think? Besides just families with the red flag laws, how do you identify these people that commit these mass shootings?
Well, you know, look at that. I mean, that's why we have that's why we need a more robust mental health system, right? So that we can actually start intervening with people who really show signs of having a risk. But I do think these red flag laws, I mean, in my state, I think last year it was used 180 times. It's a high standard. You know, you just can't go into court and get the judge to take the firearm away from your family member. You got to go there and make a case. And the case is based on the fact that there's a diagnosed mental illness, they have a firearm, and they've done something specifically to threaten either themselves or someone else. But it's a good example of a smart policy. And we need more of those kind of things where you have actually identification and intervention right at the local level. So clearly we need background checks, clearly we need limitations on high-powered assault weapons, but we also have to be being smarter about identifying some of these situations before they happen.
All right, that's all the time we have on TV. Congressman Delaney, this conversation will continue online. We want to tell you our next guest will be Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana. That's next week, but for now this conversation will continue online and on our mobile app. You can join us over there.